Our next group, it's going to be a quartet. They're going to sing the story of Ottemere Lake and hopefully do interpretive dance as well. I don't know if I've been misled in this, but we're looking forward to a dynamic and interesting presentation from, I'll let them introduce themselves. Thank you.
Okay, we'll click on that. 49 degrees, 55 minutes, latitude north. 94 degrees, 55 minutes, longitude west. 28 air miles northwest of Kenora. At milepost 151, Reddit Subdivision, Canadian National Railway, CNR Main Line. Otter Lake is the name we were called by the surveyors.
I would like to thank and acknowledge the people of Treaty Area 3 for sharing their land and resources with us. My name is Alisheya Walker, Sangade Bumtsa, which means things with a strong heart. I am from the Wolf Clan. Stone artifacts found on both of the beaches, the island, the portage, and several points on land on which cottages are now built show First Nations peoples walked the land, had traditional territories, and traveled the waters more than 5,000 years ago. They traveled in groups of 35 to 50, moving to and from seasonal camps on well-worn paths. Traditional areas gave them all they needed to live with the land, animals, and the world they occupied. Pre-contact tools were crafted from stone, wood, sinew, and animal parts. The first peoples made projectile points that were lashed onto wooden shafts for spears, and made smaller ones called arrows that were shot from bows. They crafted hammerheads or mauls, knives, and all kinds of scrapers to scrape the flesh and fat from the animals' hides. Anishinaabe were nomadic, with settled villages in their territories, but also traveled great distances to trade, make treaties, and marriage alliances with other First Nations. The fact that Knife River flint, only found in South Dakota, has been found in the Ottemere area shows how large their trading territory must have been. The tools were used in everyday life to secure and prepare food, make homes, utensils, ceremony items, and whatever was needed for life. Food was from the land: fish, animals, birds, seeds, berries, and plants. 2,400 years ago, a climate change occurred and wild rice became part of our traditional culture. So unique and special was the rice that there are many stories and ceremonies around wild rice. We consider it a sacred plant. When the wild rice became a part of our life, the art of pottery making began. Sand mixed with clay was used from local beaches, and they decorated their pots with designs made by pressing a cord-wrapped stick into the clay before the pot was fired. The Anishinaabe were strongly aware of the resources and environment, which helped them to develop a way of life that stood the test of time. Life depended on the first people's ability and skill to make clothing, find food sources, shelter, and strong family relationships to survive the long, harsh winter months. Out of this knowledge system grew a great respect for all life. One example would have been the full use of taking the life of an animal. Every part was used, and they thanked the Creator for allowing them to have food. The children played on the beaches in the summer, just as my friends and I do today.
Hi, I'm Luane Campbell. Better put my glasses on so I can see this. Habitation of British North Americans by non-Indigenous people was mainly on the waterways. People settled near the waterways for ease of travel. In 1832, an act was passed by the legislature of Lower Canada allowing a railroad, and soon a transcontinental line was born. The Canadian Pacific Railway was completed with much hardship in 1866. The Grand Trunk the Grand Trunk Railway Company was one of the many railway companies operating in eastern Canada at that time. Charles Melville Hayes, president of the Grand Trunk Railroad Company, announced in 1903 that he had partnered with the government to build another transcontinental line. So in the spring of 1905, survey parties were sent out from various locations to survey the line. The largest problem noted between Lake Nipigon and the prairies was muskeg. This was in addition to the arduous task of finding routes, running lines, and transporting information and supplies back and forth over great distances. The first contracts for construction were awarded in April 1906, and the 245-mile section from Superior Junction to Winnipeg was given to the J.D. MacArthur and Company. We can all empathize with the plights of these individuals: minus 30-degree temperatures in the winter, torrid summer heat and humidity, combined with the swarms of black flies and mosquitoes. The work was completed in 1911 after many delays and conflicts. Once regular train service was established, the campers soon followed. In the early years, the train only stopped at Malachi Lake. That's 2 miles west of Otter Lake. Campers walked with packs, carrying supplies and children up the tracks to Otter Lake. As one early camper, Jack Tuxford, recalls, before 1931, we walked from Malachi to Otter Lake as no train stopped. The 2-mile trek was not so bad, with 20 or so walking. Animals seen along the tracks made for a pleasant journey. At the time, I can remember my Uncle Ab carrying my sister Eunice on his pack, as she was too small to walk. I'm sure he found the 2 miles a lot longer. Ken Collier adds, in the early years, almost everything was carried from Malachi. Ernie Hatcher, for one, hauled all his materials for his camp down the creek. I recall hearing of Frank Pearson's cook stove being carried down the tracks from Malachi. When the railroad was being built, the Ontario government allocated 18 miles on either side of the survey line as a timber source to be used during construction. Once the work was done and the rail was operating, the 36-mile timber reserve was rescinded and the land reverted back to the Crown. These reserves were then surveyed and sold by public bid. This is how the Otter Lake Lath Mill came to be. The mill was in operation for probably less than 2 years, around 1927. Word has it, business ceased rather quickly. Dishes were left set on the table. It's pure speculation what caused the hasty evacuation, but bankruptcy, skullduggery, or strike were some of the rumors circulated. Remnants such as flywheels, boilers, parts of the smokestack can still be found in and around the property today. In 1936, a letter was written by Mr. Charles Walton representing the Ottemere Campers Association in regards to the deteriorating state of the mill. The final paragraph of the letter reads, "As taxpayers in a summer resort in Ontario, we realize we cannot close out mills operating and would have no objection to them operating on our lake, but we do strongly object to this terrible pile of scrap iron, which is hard to believe was ever a lath mill. This is good property and we wish to know when it will be for sale for summer campers looking for property." The ministry responded with, "We are advised that the mill and other buildings are in no worse condition than any other idle sawmill property. Furthermore, they are located too close to the railway for the site to be an attractive summer resort land." I'm wondering if the current owners feel the same way about the ministry's assessment of their property and actually one of our beaches. The name Ottemere was given to identify the train stop and post office because there was another Otter Lake in Ontario. And actually, I think there's like 30 Otter Lakes in Ontario. So Ottemere is what the campers today commonly call the lake.
Oh, yeah, I should have worn my sunglasses. My name is Marie Allan, and I'll be talking about my family, the Hurleys. Originally from Ireland, my great-grandfather, Ernest E. Hurley, was a Western tenor and sang for silent movies in various towns and cities across Canada, including Kenora. During this time, he met George Bradley of Malachi. Mr. Bradley invited Great-Grandpa to stay at his camp to fish and relax. It was at this time Great-Grandpa first came upon Otter Lake when paddling down the creek. Towards the end of the First World War, Great-Grandpa was diagnosed with tuberculosis and faced with the choice of going to a sanatorium or being isolated with fresh air. He decided to build a small cabin on Otter Lake to recover or die from his illness. Needless to say, he recovered and opened Hurley's Camps on Otter Lake in the early 20s. Hurley's Camps began as a general store, and as business expanded, a new location on the lake was chosen. Great-Grandpa would sell supplies to the mill workers while it was in operation and delivered fresh veggies from his garden door to door on Malachi and Ottemere. A post office was opened, and log cabins, boats, motors, and canoes became available for rent. Aboriginals would purchase groceries and sell furs while traveling to and from their seasonal camps. Mill workers would come every Sunday and buy beer by the bottle. Guiding services to nearby lakes Pelican Pouch and Signet were also available. Many of the postcards you will see in today's slideshow were available for sale in Hurley's store. These postcards were made by Great-Grandpa, who was a professional photographer. Many repeat customers were regarded as Ottemerians, and others became property owners. Word of mouth was the advertising, and there was rarely an empty cottage in the summer. I've grown up hearing stories of the Saturday night dances at the Hurley store, where everyone danced to music played on a wind-up gramophone. Great-Grandpa's tenor voice could be heard singing Irish songs while rowing his boat on the lake. He was also known for his stories, like the one where the sticks in his garden were lightning rods, so every time there was a storm, lightning would hit the rods and go into the ground, which was why he had such good potatoes. Another important connection to Malachi is a woman by the name of Hilda Simpson, who became my great-grandmother. Hilda was a cousin to Bill and J.B. Simpson, who were Northwest Mounted Police in Kenora before the railroad was built. J.B. later opened a store at Malachi. My great-grandparents married in 1933, and in 1934 had one son, my grandpa Richard. When it was time for Grandpa to go to school, he was one of many children across Canada at that time who went to school on a rail car. I think there's a picture of him going to school, yeah. The Department of Education in Ontario saw a need to provide an education for the children of railway workers, trappers, prospectors, and store operators of the northern settlements. Building schools at such stations was not practical, so an agreement was reached between the railways and the Ontario Department of Education to provide classrooms that were made from converted passenger cars. Grandpa said one end of the school car had 12 desks and a blackboard, as well as a small library. The other end was living quarters for the teacher and their families. These coaches would be moved from place to place and operated between 1926 and 1967. Grandpa would tell us about going to school on the rail car, including the special rock at the end of the path where he hid his rubber boots and changed into his shoes on his walk to Malachi, which was where the school car was located. Once he finished grade 9, he started helping his parents with Hurley's Camps full-time. Prior to telephone service in Ottemere, if there was an emergency, someone had to run the 2 miles to Malachi to use the phone or send a telegram requesting a train stop. Sometimes the section crew used a motor car to assist in the transport of the injured person, but it was usually a train. Sadly, Grandpa was the one who had to run to Malachi in 1958 when his dad had a fatal heart attack at the Ottemere train station. 2 years later, he was put in the same situation when his mother fell seriously ill. Grandpa met his future wife, my grandma Marlene, while she was working at the store in Malachi in April 1960. They married in September 1960 and had 3 children while living full-time at Ottemere: Penny, Ernie, and Donna. Penny and Ernie were born in the Kenora Hospital and flown home in a bush plane by Kenny Race. The infamous Kenny Race. Being a summer baby, Donna was also born in the Kenora Hospital, but she arrived at the lake by boat in a garbage bag during a thunderstorm. My grandparents continued to run Hurley store and post office full-time until 1969, when their oldest, Penny, who's my mom, had to go to school. They moved to Reddit so Mom could go to school in Kenora. After moving to Reddit, they had their fourth child, Brandy, and continued with a summer post office and store at Ottemere until 1990. Great-grandpa sold a portion of his trap line to trappers Aaron Westman and Eric Anderson, who came to Otter Lake from Pellet, Ontario in the mid-1920s. They built a cabin at the south end of the lake and trapped as partners, but after about a year, Anderson left. Westman was a very kind man, a grandfatherly type. Of Scandinavian descent, he was a fairly large man with white hair and a handlebar mustache. Although hard of hearing, he was very soft-spoken, intuitive to danger, and deadly with a rifle. He smoked a pipe. His English was not good, he did not talk a lot, and was not much for visiting. There was a comfortable, peaceful atmosphere around his place. He grew beautiful flowers and was a very tidy man. Westman did odd jobs for cottagers. He would cut and split wood for about $1 a cord in the late 30s. Price for sharpening an axe? A packet of tobacco. Nora Hayward would bake him bread for transporting goods from the train. Great-grandpa and Westman were hired to build the cabin on the island. Westman trapped a very large black wolf, which he sold to the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. So that's the skull. Westman died in December 1941. He fell through the ice at the mouth of the creek on his way to Hurley's store. Grandpa, who was 7 years old at the time, told his parents he could see what looked like ducks in the water at the mouth of the creek. Realizing it was Westman, my great-grandparents told Grandpa to stay in the cabin, and they took a canoe out on the ice to try and rescue him. They also fell through the ice. Despite great-grandpa never learning to swim, my great-grandparents were able to save themselves, but not Westman. When great-grandpa came back in the house, he threw his tobacco in the stove and never smoked again. Westman's body was stored in one of Hurley's rental cabins until the ground thawed enough to dig a grave. A cairn, built by the campers, marks the spot where he is buried along the path on the north side of the tracks. Great-grandpa sold another portion of his trap line to Charles H. Robinson in 1944. He lived in the same cabin built by Aaron Westman. Robinson was not considered a true trapper by most, since the majority of his time was spent raising Malamute dogs. He kept excellent kennels for his dogs that he raised and sold for dog teams. When he sold a dog, he would put it in a crate and tow it by hand to the train station. Robinson was a retired Mountie and a great storyteller who claimed he was once made an Indian chief. Noreen Everton remembers seeing a photograph of him in full headdress. There were pictures of Robinson with a wrestler, Yukon Eric, who Robinson said he once managed. Judging by the stories he told, he led a very colorful life, and there was always a picture or relics to back up his tales. Robinson always rowed his boat backwards so he could see where he was going. He left Ottemere in the mid-50s. Earl McGovern bought the trapline from Charles Robinson in 1946. He built his camp beside the portage. He would lie on the inside of his house with firewood so he would not have to go outside in the winter. He would keep a box over his water hole with a hurricane lamp inside so the hole would not freeze. He always said, if you went outside and the snow squeaked underfoot, it was too cold to go anywhere. My uncle, Elton Donaldson, recalled dodging drying hides that were hanging from the ceiling when you went to visit. There was a crock that sat behind the cook stove all winter, full of sourdough starter that was used to make pancakes. It was covered in ashes that were just scraped aside when the dough was needed. Earl's arthritis forced him to give up his way of life at Ottemere, and he moved to Winnipeg in the latter 60s. Grandpa continued to trap until 1970.
Well, we're not done. We're not done yet. We're going to all three talk some more, so that's okay. Even today, there is no road access to Ottemere. The journey is by rail, water, or airplane. There is vehicle access to Pelican Pouch Landing, then an 8-mile boat ride, a 200-meter land portage, and you are finally there. Now all you have to do is load your boat one more time and head across the lake to your own cabin. Recollections of Ottemere were captured in a book published in 1996. We will now share some excerpts from the book about life at Ottemere to bring you into our community. Graham Collier. Those who grew up at Ottemere realize how difficult it is to explain to others what Ottemere really means to us. The memories that remain still fresh, the experiences that provide us our visions, and the friends that we are bonded to. It is a place that has made us who we are, a place that has shaped and molded us, a place that has made us unique. We did not create Ottemere, yet it has shaped us.
Anne Faulkner. School was over June 1961, and I was on the train heading east. Roads and farms had been left behind, and beautiful but rugged scenery flashed by the train window. The ring on my finger assured me that Ron was real. But what if I had taken the wrong train? What if I got off at the wrong station? What if Ron did not meet me in the pouring rain? I had new plaid shorts, a roast in my suitcase. I was wearing a new red raincoat, and I was scared. The train slowed for Ottemere, and there was Ron, waiting patiently. That was my introduction to cottage and the lake and how city people like to spend at least part of their summer.
Pop Cox. Train service was quite good in the 40s and early 50s. The local came down Mondays and Wednesdays. Moonachie Special came down and returned on the same day on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The 2 campers specials came down on Friday night and Saturday noon. You could hop on the Moonachie Special at Ottemere and have about 3 hours in Moonachie before it went back. This gave the folks a little time to do some shopping and have a couple of ales at Holt's Point. If the conductor was really busy, you could travel for free.
David Pearson. A highlight of cottage life was to take the Tuesday or Friday train to Moonachie for shopping, where the adults would walk over to the lodge for other refreshments. This often left the kids with a little unsupervised time on their hands. One enjoyed sport was to hide in the bush around the golf course and watch the golfers' reaction when they would be in their swing and Barry would scream, 4, at the top of his lungs. I still recall the determination of one lady who chased us a considerable distance with her golf club swinging in the air, threatening dire consequences.
Arlene Prokopchuk. I've felt aches from portaging with luggage that's slightly, but not felt the need to pack very lightly.
You don't know what an adventure is until you've hit the portage at midnight on a moonless night. We had our 4 children, a big dog, all our luggage, and enough food for 4 days. Oh, I mustn't forget the raisin pie packed in a plastic bag and securely placed on the seat of the boat. I dropped Keith at the portage and then tried to row the boat onto the dolly. It was so dark, Keith had to light a cigarette on shore, and I aimed for it. I was concentrating so hard at the task on hand, I completely forgot about the pie. First I stepped in it, then I knelt in it, and finally I sat in it. By the time we reached the cabin, we were famished and tired, so I ripped open the plastic bag containing the remains of the pie, handed everybody a spoon, and said, "Help yourself."
Sandra Burkholtz. There are so many stories and memories that we have to keep. All the lugging and hauling seems unimportant. The complaining about coming down by boat in the rain seems trivial. All of it can be forgotten with one glance over the lake. Ottemere has given us so many new friends. The people are so much an important part of it all.
Polly Lang. Lyle and Bud brought down their families in August 1955, and Burl and I were dismayed. No partitions? Ropes were strung and sheets hung, making a bedroom for each family. Good heavens, no back house? Thelma and Don Campbell had come over to see how things were going, and, miracle of all miracles, they had an old back house as they had just put up a new one. The men went over to bring it back and returned at dusk. Folks around the lake could see this unidentifiable large box-type cargo, but in the dim light couldn't make out what it was. Some bright, or not so bright, soul started the rumor that it was a piano. Ye gods! No stove, no fridge, and a piano yet? It should be noted that the old back house of Campbell's long outlasted their new one. Many times they begged for it back, but 3 guesses at the rude answers they received? We were always generous enough to let them use it, though, but only in cases of dire necessity. There was only subflooring that first fall with big knotholes which allowed any small critters to enter at will. I remember Noreen Everton remarking on our clean floors. The mice cleaned up everything. No sweeping. Good. We didn't have a broom anyway.
Joe Policelli. People were upset with the motor I brought down. They said I was tearing up the lake with my big 10-horsepower motor. We would put less hay behind the boat on a sheet of plywood, surfboard style. He was the lightest of us.
Lori Hay. Going to the Hurley store was an event. 3 vivid memories about the store are the beautiful tiger lilies out front, the wonderful smell of the gasoline shed, and the great glass jars full of chocolate candies. One trip, Dad gave me 10 cents to buy candies for my sister Bonnie and myself. Bonnie was not with us, which is fortunate for me. I purchased 5 Jersey milk chocolate squares at 2 cents each. My dad asked me how I was going to divide them evenly. Well, I said, if I eat one now, that'll leave 4. Bonnie gets 2 and I get 2. Sounds good to me. Bonnie always did trust me too much. In later years, fetching a block of ice was an interesting job. I liked watching Dick Hurley cut up the ice and rinse off the sawdust in the lake, then watching it melt in the canvas at the bottom of the boat as you headed home in a 5 Viking. The block needed another wash by the time we finally got up the hill. On a hot day, the ice water running down your back was cooling. We did not have to chip much by the time it finally got into the ice box, I'll tell you. Getting back to Dad coming down on weekends, here's the drift. Early supper Friday, wash up and look your best because Dad's coming down and we want to show him we missed him. Mom looks great. Hair curled with pin curls that day. Mind you, slightly wrung out from a week alone with us. The train is in. Got your pennies on the tracks? Once Jimmy Kralka stuck a frog on the tracks and flattened it. Yuck. Dad unloading the baggage car with Norm Reed and the others. Kids and adults yelling greetings, hugs, kisses, carrying supplies to the cottage. Reports on what angels we've been all week. Checking the treats in the pack sack, then to bed. Now the clincher. Though I love my dad dearly, my last thoughts before sleep are, oh boy, tomorrow we can swim out past the end of the dock and we can drive the boat.
Lynn Allan. One year I made a point of going with Elton and Joan for Christmas Day at the Hurleys. More people came down on Boxing Day, but Christmas Day was really neat. It was so different, almost like going back in time. It was quiet. No hustle and bustle. It was nice to have the quiet. No cars, no phones. We were in our own little world. Ottemere is like a big family. I will probably go down there until I die, or until the Hurleys kick me out.
Susan Cox. Most of the winters we rang in the new year at the lake at 30 below and said we would never do it again. But there is something to be said for the clean white of the snow and the solitude in winter. A wonderful, relaxing way to start a brand new year.
Margaret Knowles. We seem to remember only the good times. If they were bad, I cannot remember them. The fish fries, sing-songs, and the time when Mr. Hurley cleaned out his store and room and we had square dances. One night, Jenny Everton lifted Ray right off his feet and swung him around. We could hardly finish the dance from laughing. One Saturday night, sitting in Hurley's kitchen listening to the football game, Ken Collier stood up, and being so tall, sent the coal oil lamp flying. In all of our travels, and they have been extensive, we have yet to meet a finer bunch than our fellow campers.
In 1990, Via Rail cut the campers' special train. Here's an excerpt from an article Bill Blakey, Manitoba Member of Parliament, wrote mourning the loss. To my mind, it has always been a great source of comfort knowing that this little piece of Canadiana was surviving the onslaught of progress. In an increasing optimistic world, out of the back of Transcona shops, people still wait for a train together, help load it together, keep in touch with people from other lakes, shared stories and information, met their future wives or husbands, help unloaded the train together, and if you were from Transcona, you probably knew the train crew as well. People knew who were down at the lake this weekend, who needed help, which motor needed repairing, where the fish were biting, or the blueberries were especially good.
Garth Collier. Looking back now in the mid-90s makes me feel sad to think the previous owners had to give up the beauty, serenity, and friendships that they were a part of for so long. But they chose to give up their camps because they wanted to leave while it was still good, while the memories were happy, bright, and youthful. That's the way it should be. As sad as it is, and as much as it hurts, we too will have to leave. But as sure as the seasons turn, new people rush in to begin anew the cycle of laughter, sending new memories rippling across the waters of Ottemere.
Just as great-grandpa's tenor voice could be heard rippling across the waters, singing the song he wrote. Old Ireland has Killarney, old England Windermere, the lakes and fells of Scottish dells, we love them very dear. There's Lakes Louise and Moline, their waters deep and clear. God took a rest, then made the best. We named it Ottemere.